Welcome to the thrilling world of the flying runner, brought to you by the Marathon Mates.
Hey there, everyone. It's Tony from the Flying Runner podcast, and welcome to Out and Back. Out and Back, the turnaround point for your weekly running journey. Now, on this week's episode of the Flying Runner podcast, due out this Friday, we have the pleasure to speaking with Robert Wang, who you may know or should know. He's the gentleman that hosts the World Majors Challenge group on Facebook. And that's a community that has over 22,000 people in it. It is a massive community. And the advice and the insights and the experience that Robert shares within that group makes it a must-do for every runner in my book. Now, after speaking with him, he encouraged me to share my Boston story on his new group, which is designed for those people that are worried about the 6-hour cutoff for the up-and-coming Boston Marathon. Now, of course, you may know that Boston has a very strict 6-hour cutoff period, and it's from the time the last runner crosses the start line, which sounds good, but it's one of those things that you never really know when the cutoff is if you weren't indeed the last starter. And that story I've now shared in his new group, and it's the first time that I've ever really shared that story in full in public. Now, I've shared that in groups of friends and with other marathon mates, but ultimately this is the first time that I put it out there. But one thing that really stood out when I was putting my words on the paper was that absolute feeling of helplessness and lack of control that I had during much of the Boston Marathon. I had issues with my calves and my quads severely cramping up. And the feeling and the stress and the anxiety leading into Boston all came flooding back as I shared that story. The feeling of helplessness and lack of control during the race, and the stress and anxiety that I felt in the lead up to the race. Now, ultimately, in a nutshell, we had hiccups in our travel. We missed connecting flights, and we ended up getting into Boston, 12 hours roughly after when we had planned to get into Boston. And with any sort of missed flight, there's always more stress involved in additional accommodation and then making sure you're ready to go for the next connecting flight. Also in Boston, I took some Imodium to control some tummy issues the day before the marathon. The marathon there, of course, is run on a Monday. And I took some Imodium without realizing the full impact that would have on my hydration. And ultimately, I think when I pinpointed, that was probably the main issue that I had, the fact that I tried to run the race dehydrated. Of course, I was worried also about Porta Potties, as many people are when it comes to marathons, the lineups, the non-hygienic standards of many of them. There's always a little bit of stress around the Porta Potties. And the last thing that I was really concerned about was the length of the bus trip from Boston Commons out to the start area at Hopkinton. So there was a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety. And what that created was I was putting energy into the wrong part of what I should be putting energy into. And ultimately, you learn every race you run, you learn the major problems that you have. And I learned so much about myself in Boston. I learned so much about my wife, Sharon, in Boston. And, it's pretty clear to see that the 3 marathons I've run after Boston have been much better, So what did I learn, and what are the steps that I can share with you? And these aren't comprehensive steps. They're not anything earth-shattering. They're just little things that I've done that I just feel has equipped me better to be doing what it is that I do. And I guess the step number one is always prepare for what worries you. So in the case of Boston, it's a 6-hour cutoff. In the case of Tokyo, just completed, it's the continuation of the cutoffs throughout the race. So whether it's cutoff, whether it's milestones, you need to prepare for it. You need to train for it. And you have to get on that line confident that you can do it. Race day motivation, enthusiasm, inspiration will take you so far, but by itself, it will not get you anywhere near the ballpark you need to. So you need to face that line confident, and you do that by making sure that you've prepped as best you can to cover the things that worry you. Secondly, I've learned to go with the flow a little bit more. Things outside of our control will always happen. Yes, these things happening can potentially upset and derail us if we allow them to be, but sometimes acceptance is the only thing that you may have. So factor in times if need be within your travel. If that is what worries you, factor it in. Make sure you can prep as much of you as you can, but ultimately things will happen outside of your control, and that's just something you need to just be thinking about. Going with the flow, accepting what it is, and not necessarily putting too much energy into those what ifs or if onlys. It is what it is. Sometimes things will happen outside of your control, and sometimes acceptance is the only thing. And the last thing is, don't let temporary discomfort override your decision making, especially in my case where I let that temporary concern about porta potties and the long bus trip out to the start line derail my hydration, as well as the Imodium the day before, which, unbeknownst to me or without thinking, dehydrated me anyway as part of what it does. So don't let temporary discomfort override your decision making, especially when it comes to your marathon preparation. Yes, I don't like porta potties. I'm not on my Pat Malone there. I know that there's a number of people out there that don't like porta potties, but unfortunately, they're a necessary evil if you wish to fuel and hydrate sufficiently for your next marathon. And that's it. That's Out and Back for another bonus episode. Make sure you tune in this Friday, our episode with Robert Wang. It is an absolute classic, and I know that you'll get so much out of it. So make sure you tune into it and share it with all your friends, especially all of your friends who are contemplating running any of the world marathon majors. Robert Wang's Facebook group is definitely the place to get the very best advice. Until then, I hope to see you out there. Happy running.